I'm really interested in romantic comedy. I don't know why. I think that's where I pour all of my feelings in when I find them. But there's a really interesting kind of three-way love triangle that is seen in a lot of romantic comedy films. Can you talk about that and the kind of because in also romantic comedy films, is not sometimes I feel like there's not always a worthy opponent. So how would you go about kind of making that the strongest it could be?
That's a challenge, I think, for writing romantic comedies is, and we see, I think the ones that are less successful often have this issue where there's the guy she's supposed to be with, or the girl he's supposed to be with, or that, same
Yeah,
gender,
yeah,
she's supposed to be with this. And the rival is not a worthy rival. And so
yeah,
you feel like there's no dramatic tension. That's why
yeah,
the person that the rival should be as strong. Like you could make a legitimate argument that that person should or could very well be in the life of the protagonist. And
yeah,
so, like for example, in Sleepless in Seattle, if you look at the perspective of the Meg Ryan character, I think Annie is her name, if I believe,
yeah. And you
she's
read,
with she's
yeah,
with this guy who's a really nice guy. I think they did a great job on that. He's a nice guy. I mean, they are in sync. Like there's this little scene where they're getting ready to go to bed, and he's doing
yeah,
his little nose thing, and she's,
yeah,
they have this little routine down. Or when they go shopping, they're going shopping for their silverware or plates. They
yeah,
say eight is too few, 12 is too many, 10, and they both agree. So they are in alignment. They have
yeah,
they have a lifestyle that's very comfortable.
yeah,
But the thing is, that's not connecting with what she needs. That may be what she wants. Like I found a guy
yeah.
who slots into what I think love is about.
Right.
But she's somehow connecting with this guy Sam via the airwaves, the radio,
Yeah,
because it's speaking to her need, which is that
yeah,
emotional thing. She wants
yeah,
passion. She wants that connection that's deeper than what she has with her current boyfriend. And
yeah,
so that's a really good example of a triangle that works because you could totally see her ending up with the guy, the rival.
yeah,
Um, so that whenever you write a romantic comedy, I think it's important, unless you're doing like a broad, comedy version of it where it's so obvious that
right.
the rival is not the right guy. Then I suppose you can get away with that. It's just sort of funny, but at some point, the audience will lose respect or patience with the protagonist because, like,
Yeah,
can't you see this guy's an idiot?
yeah,
Why are you? What? And that's also a danger right off the bat. I mean, the less uh, human the rival is, the less we can connect with them and say, oh, you know what, that's a reasonable choice. Then the likelihood is we're going to lose respect for the protagonist because their judgment's
yeah,
not good. So that's a big issue, you know. Now
yeah,
you could have situations like when Harry Met Sally, where there is no rival. The rival is conceptual. The
yeah,
rival is,
yeah,
well, what Billy Crystal's character says when Harry says, "I don't believe you can be friends with a woman."
yeah,
It's
yeah,
you're either going to sleep with them or not.
yeah,
And so there is this conceptual philosophical thing. And
yeah,
of course, at first, he's so different than what she thinks she's looking for in a guy. So she's got a conceptual hang up. Both of them have to work
yeah,
through that. That's why they develop that friendship. And then eventually they do initiate it.
yeah,
And then that wonderful scene at the end, where
yeah,
he goes racing through
yeah,
and says, I realize that, that great line, I have to paraphrase it. I realize that when I know the person that I want to spend the rest of my life with, I want to get to them as soon as possible to spend
yeah,
that my
yeah,
life with them.
yeah,
So,
yeah. That's great. Do you think that also works because Carrie Fisher, her character, and her husband or her partner, they absolutely kind of mirror the relationship that Harry and Sally want?
Just from a basic ease of screenwriting standpoint, you want often to have a friend,
Right.
the best
Yeah.
friend, right?
Yeah.
Because that gives an opportunity for the character, the protagonist character, to share their inner feelings and thoughts with someone else. I mean,
Yeah.
that's one of the challenges of writing a screenplay, is it's primarily an externalized reality. It's not
Yeah.
like a novel where you can just
Yeah.
go inside a character's consciousness for a chapter or two.
Yeah.
So that just fundamentally is a good reason why those two characters, Bruno Kirby and Carrie Fisher's characters,
Yeah.
exist. Bruno Kirby is Billy Crystal's best friend, Harry's best friend,
Yeah.
and Carrie Fisher is Sally's best friend.
Yeah.
And so, but they do develop a relationship. We get to see Carrie Fisher and Bruno Kirby. I don't think they had the same sort of conceptual hang-up that
Right.
either Sally or Harry had.
Yeah.
But it does, in a way, create a path scenario, because they do have a successful relationship, that it is possible. It creates that possibility for Harry. Of course, and Harry's divorced too,
Yeah.
so it's harder for him to imagine getting back, with someone. And so I think it does work that way. But certainly it works where, remember that great scene? They did it, where they're both on
Yeah.
the phones,
Yeah.
right?
That's great scene. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just a wonderful scene. I mean, Nora Ephron was just
Yeah.
such a gift.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
So yeah, I think you're on target there. There's something about that relationship between those two, that subplot relationship, that does serve and support where Harry and Sally go eventually, enabling them to, or supporting them in that process of seeing that, yeah, we should be together.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. It's a great telephone scene. And then they're in the restaurant and what they're both thinking, and then I think he says it first. He's like, "We should never have done it," and then it's just like, and she's really disappointed, but she doesn't want to show. So yeah, it's a great movie, and it's great. It's kind of because you also mentioned It Happened One Night, which is another film that I love, and that seems to be like the whole. I didn't realize until I saw it a few years ago, I guess now, but it's and the Philadelphia Story is similar. There seems to be a lot of romantic comedies where somebody works for the press or they're in newspapers, and it's creating those kind of characters that aren't trustworthy at the beginning, I guess, and then when they learn to trust each other at the end. Do you think that's the arc that a lot of characters should have?
Well, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, that stories are fundamentally about self-identity. And if you look at It Happened One Night, 1934, the movie, it's one of three movies that have won the big five Academy Awards: Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Director, Best Screenplay.
Yeah.
The other two being One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and The Silence of the Lambs.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the first screwball comedy.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful movie. I used to teach a class called History of American Screenwriting, and we would watch movies every week that were decade by decade.
Right.
And that was the one for the 30s.
Yeah.
And of course, my students are like, "Oh, we have to watch this black and white movie."
Yeah.
And they love that movie. College students
Yeah.
just adored that movie. It's so great.
Yeah.
So Clark Gable's character is he's a newspaper guy, and you see that he's like he got fired, and but he's a rascal, and and one of the reasons why I think stories. First of all, there were a lot of newspapers back then. I mean, many cities had like 6 or 7 or 8 daily newspapers, like New York did, and so. And that's how people largely got their news, that, and I suppose the radio. So there was a prominence there, but also it gives you the device for the plot.
Right.
Like, why would Clark Gable be at all interested in this runaway bride? Right? The daughter of a millionaire.
Yeah, just happens to be. Yeah.
Who's in love with this rival, King somebody or other.
Yeah.
Um, you know, well, he's a newspaper guy. He's out of a job. He sees this opportunity. I'm going to travel with her and get this story, and I'll be back on top again. So that's
Yeah.
the narrative conceit there, right?
Yeah.
And it also enables you to have them pressing questions and trying to find out what's going on with
Right.
the person they're tagged with. And
Yeah.
so he does start off as as this rascal.
Yeah.
You know, you see him. He's trying. He's going to use her
Yeah.
to advance his own, but then he falls in love with her.
Yeah.
But we see at the very end when he goes to see her father, you know, he's thinking that this guy's going to want to extort a bunch of money from me.
Right.
But Clark Gable's character says, I only want $222 or whatever it is. I can't remember the amount
Yeah.
for the things that I've paid for your daughter. That's all I want. I don't want anything else. And he's,
Yeah.
so you see that he's fundamentally got, a heart of gold, is a solid
Yeah.
moral character. And he, I think, discovers that in a way. He discovers, how to be emotionally, again, she's an attractor character. If you look at the story from his perspective as a
Right.
protagonist, like
Yeah.
he's an attractor character for her. So they
Yeah.
both get in touch with an authentic form of romance, of love, that enables them by the end to
Yeah.
get together.
Yeah.
So it's a fantastic movie. And what's so great about it is back in the day, this was like when the Hays Code was coming into
Right. Yeah.
play
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Hollywood,
Censorship,
where
wasn't it?
you couldn't display stuff and you couldn't say things, and
Yeah.
particularly around sex.
Yeah.
Like the very first line he says to her, they're on the bus. She
Yeah.
scoots past him because he's having an argument with the bus driver.
Yeah.
The bus is completely full. She takes his seat, which he
Yeah.
had in the back, and he comes and looks at her sitting in there, and he says, "Excuse me, that upon which you sit is mine,"
Right.
which is a funny line when you think
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
It's like, wait a minute, what's going on there? But this was what the screenwriters were doing, was
Right.
they were intimating, they were using subtext. That whole
Yeah.
thing about the wall of Jericho,
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just great stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's absolutely a brilliant romantic comedy.
Yeah. She's Claudette Colbert gives a speech at the AFI for George Cukor, I think, the director, and she talks about how they came up with that the phrase "the Wall of Jericho," and she talks about they weren't sure what the movie was going to be about, and then the director came up with this idea, and that separates them, and that was when they first got what the movie was. So again, it's really interesting. You see things differently. Um,
She
you know,
thought she
yeah,
thought it was going to be a bomb. She
yeah, yeah,
when they were having the Academy Awards, she was going to. I think she was getting ready to take a flight to Detroit or something like that, and they
right,
hustled her back to the
right.
award ceremony.
Oh wow,
So,
yeah,
yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, and the other, I guess one of the the one that I love, the like a real three-way love triangle is the Philadelphia Story. You've got
yeah,
Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart
Jim Stewart.
and Katharine Hepburn. And again, how do you because that's interesting because there's like a flashback at the beginning which shows them outside on the steps and it shows their breakup, but also that straight away reminded me of Trainwreck, where there's a flashback of their dad telling them that monogamy isn't
Right.
realistic. Both completely different, but both kind of using, the same tool to tell a story. Do you want to
Yeah.
talk about how to set how best to set up? I guess a moment. Does it depend on what do you need first of all to kind of create a really good scene?
That is a device.
Yeah,
That idea of a flashback starting in the past. I think the reason you would do that, like with Trainwreck, is a perfect example. Is to there is again that's a conceptual constraint that she has.
yeah,
Monogamy isn't
isn't
monogamy
realistic.
isn't realistic.
monogamy isn't realistic, and he repeats that
Yeah,
over and
they
over.
repeat it.
Yeah,
Monogamy is so that becomes. Then you go to a voiceover where you see a montage of her
yeah,
dating all these guys, and
yeah,
she's got this life where she's working for this magazine,
yeah,
and she's thinking she's happy, and
yeah,
she's is branded with this commandment from her father that monogamy isn't realistic,
yeah,
and so that means that the idea of having a long-standing monogamous relationship just is not in the cards for her. And then she meets Bill Hader's character,
yeah,
and so that challenges. It's a similar sort of thing with Harry and When Harry Met Sally,
yeah,
challenges that conceptual constraint. So in that case, that was a really brilliant bit of business that Amy Schumer came up with when she wrote the script. Let's start with she and her sister when
yeah,
they're kids, and there's this story from their father. You don't want to eat spaghetti every night.
yeah, yeah,
You don't want to play with the same doll every
yeah,
time,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
which helps us, and not only sets up that conceptual constraint that she has, but also helps us to understand, why she is the way she is, and so we have a degree of empathy for her,
yeah,
even sympathy. Like
yeah,
this poor kid was subject to propaganda from her father, her
yeah,
philandering father, which
yeah,
has deeply influenced her behavior.
yeah,
And so, maybe some people would have looked at that character if you hadn't had that preface, that tease, that we would have said, "Oh wow, this woman's sort of like lost. She's like
yeah,
dating all these guys, and
yeah,
can't kicks them out, after
yeah,
she has sex with them." That seems no. Now we understand why she does that. Oh, okay. Now I feel some degree of understanding there and sympathy
yeah.
for her.